Mate, I think so many of the people who are listening to this, watching this, will know Ash Wicks as a dad and a husband, because that's what so much of your content has been created around. Like, I remember the first time I heard about you was my sister and her partner would send me your videos.
Yeah, right.
And, well, they mentioned you first. They said, oh, there's this guy, Jam Pikelets. Do you follow him? And I'm like, what the fuck's Jam Pikelets? Right? And then I started seeing your videos, and they're hilarious, and it's really relatable content around the POV of a husband in a marriage, or just, you know, someone who's in a partnership. And I found it hilarious. And then you and Maddie had the podcast, which is still going very strong and growing, Two Doting Dads, and about your role as fathers, very modern fathers, as you say.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, and this is a question to you, do you think that your audience knows you as an individual?
Not necessarily. I mean, I sort of set out on the journey of Jam Pikelets as a creative outlet during COVID, like a lot of people did. I wanted to make something. I didn't want to make something that was slapstick. I wanted to capture the tiny moment that you have with your significant other, and the whole thing was not necessarily outside of that. I wasn't showing much more of my life. It was sort of that interaction, and people were like, "Shit, we do that too." And that really makes me tick when someone's like, "Fuck, we also have the same conversation," because we're all having the same conversations, really. But a lot of my content was just all of that. I think since meeting Matt and going on that journey and creating the podcast, I've definitely given more of my life and where I've come from, and what I do outside of making those silly videos. I think that's given me an opportunity, but like my social media itself is still very much just the skits and stuff, other than story posts of what I'm doing at the time, but nothing really in depth. A lot of people still don't even know what April looks like, even though if they dug deep enough, they'd find it. Yeah.
Is there security in that for you? Because you don't really have to reveal yourself.
Yeah, I definitely have. I definitely hide behind my humor a lot. I hide behind my hat. I hide behind my mustache a lot. It's sort of things that I have that I sort of shelter myself, use to keep a guard up for things. I don't like to think that I've used those things to keep my life private. I just don't think it was, I don't know, it wasn't really a goal of mine for my family to be that public, and even though it wouldn't matter if it is, it's just the way it's panned out at the moment, I suppose. Yeah.
Mate, it's so interesting that you say you hide behind those things like the hat, the moustache, the humour. Because to me, like, we've met properly for the first time today. We've had some interaction online, which is more or less me chasing you to get you in front of a mic. And you've certainly got a great personality. You're super likable. You're super easy to warm to. So it makes me wonder, like, hiding from what?
I don't know. I feel like if I can laugh my way out of situations, I feel more comfortable. I don't. I'm very like in a group setting or like a public setting. I'm pretty socially awkward. Like, people don't believe that. Without any humor, I feel like I wouldn't have anything to talk about sometimes. And I don't know, I can't really explain it with the hat and the moustache. The moustache is something that I feel like I would cry if it was gone. It feels like a bit of like armor at the front. And when I don't have a hat on, I just don't feel like myself. I feel naked in some way. If I've tried to like work on that. I don't know what it is, but I just feel more comfortable like that. And yeah, I think, in a social setting, if I'm without a hat and someone said you're not allowed to crack jokes and stuff like that, it would be the most awkward interaction you would have come across, I reckon. That's how I would feel.
It's interesting you say that, because I would think that that's really relatable on many levels for a lot of guys. Like, I know that it's interesting hearing you say that you feel socially awkward in some of those settings. I would say similarly, I feel socially awkward in settings where I don't necessarily feel like I belong. So
Yeah.
you put me in front of a crowd to speak, you put me behind a mic, you put me with someone that I've met for the first time, but in a relatively intimate setting, and I feel really comfortable. Or you could put me in front of a group of people, like if I walk into a new office and I've just started a new job, I feel at home to be myself. But if you put me on a night out,
Yeah.
11 o'clock, people consuming alcohol, I don't drink, and I'm certainly not a partier. And I find that in those spaces where I don't necessarily, it's not because I don't agree with drinking, it's just I've got a health thing that stops me from drinking, but I don't feel like I belong there. I feel relatively uncomfortable.
Right. Okay.
And I find myself almost like, if I don't control the cadence of this space, and I don't feel like my unique personality traits are valuable here, I tend to like kind of happily sit back and avoid the space.
Yeah, I think like I've definitely, especially in this industry, I've definitely created a dependence on alcohol for that, because I do have a lot of events, and I have been to events sober, and you know, I definitely there is that difference, of course, in terms of the social awkwardness. It's hard to explain, but if I was to go to, you know, a social event completely sober and have no sense of humor and not wearing a hat or not feeling like I've got something to protect me, I would feel, like I don't belong here. I should be at home, and I'll avoid people like at the shop who's trying to help me. You know what I mean? Like they'll be like, "Hey, can I help you?" I'm like, "Oh." I don't know, but then I'm like quite like I don't know, like I talk to people for a living, right? It's a weird,
It's a bit of a dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Is there any insecurity behind some of that, you think?
Yeah, I think there's insecurity about whether people like me for me, or people like me for my humor, or people like me for my ideas. I think, or people think I'm annoying in the other way. Like, don't know. I think.
Can I have a stab in the dark?
Yeah, fire away.
Because I feel this, and I relate to this on so many levels. So I have certain things about me that I wear or exhibit to feel more comfortable about things that I don't necessarily love about myself, right? And this is an ever evolving relationship with myself. So I feel like I have naturally quite big teeth, right?
And now I'm looking at them.
Yeah, they're big chompers, right? They're big chompers.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk, and my missus has noticed this on the podcast, I sometimes over-exaggerate my expression to pronounce words so that my teeth, like if my mouth kind of goes to like a relatively relaxed, close to closed position, I feel like it really over-accentuates my middle teeth.
Yeah, right.
So I tend to talk a little bit wider mouth, and I smile quite a lot so that my whole smile is in full force, which would sound contradictory.
Yeah.
But if I feel relaxed in my facial expression, I feel like it's more pronounced.
Right.
So little things like that, I feel like I've shaved my head a couple of times in the past, like crew cut, buzz cut, and every guy goes through a buzz phase. But I hate the way that it draws more attention to my mouth.
Okay.
And that stuff. And also like my skin. I've not always had great skin.
Yeah.
So there's those little things for me, like having a little bit of a head of hair. Like if I was balding, thank God I'm not, there'd be some insecurity rising to the surface, right? So there's these little things that we think about that sometimes become unconscious.
Yeah. I think everyone probably has those things too in some capacity. Some people could be so sure of themselves, but there's something that they don't even know subconsciously they're doing that is actually somewhat protecting their insecurities or who they are, or what they maybe were trying to run from, or whatever it might be.
So my stab in the dark is the moustache is a bit of a novelty, right? And not everyone can grow a moustache. So like there's almost a little bit of pride in it. But there's also a novelty that you don't take yourself so seriously, right? Because moustaches in this day and age are kind of a fun thing to have, right? And the hat is also a similar thing. It's quite a casual feel when you put on a hat.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't signal very dressed up, and I take myself super seriously. And so do you think that part of it is just leaning back in on that humor again?
Yeah.
Or am I wrong?
No, I think you're bang on. Really, I don't like to take myself seriously. I much prefer to be having fun than in a serious situation. I think the relaxed. I did grow the mustache as a novelty, but it sort of became part of who I am, right? And then the hat and the humor thing. It's just like I would hate for someone to think that I'm a serious person when I'm not at all. You know, like I try to be, you know, for my kids and stuff around here and there, but I also just want to have fun. And unfortunately, like it's a blessing and a curse because you can be too much for some people. It can be too much for some people. Some people love it. Some people be like, oh fuck, so there's only so much of me they can take, which is fine. It doesn't bother me that much. But I feel like if I've got the things that are protecting me, it's fine. But if I didn't have them, it wouldn't be fine.
So it's really interesting that in this day and age, you'll hear this a lot. And I say this to people a lot, specifically people I love who are struggling with this idea of comparison, is that most people are walking around day to day stressed about how they present to the world. So you stressing about how you present to them really doesn't even register with them most of the time.
Oh, for sure.
They might think about it for a second, right? But then they're worried about how they're fitting in the room and belonging.
Yeah.
And we think about identity a lot, I believe, because of social media.
Yeah.
And also because of a changing construct in the way that we fit into society. People are looking for purpose, place, belonging. There's a lot of merit in all those things. And I used to think about identity a lot, right? Like, what is my identity? Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? What's my place in this world? And then I just recently have been challenged on that whole idea. I had a gentleman by the name of Josh Zepps on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. We had Sean Zepps on our podcast, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Josh and Sean together, obviously, and they've got kids.
I didn't know that was his husband.
Yeah, I'm certain. Josh has got a podcast called
Uncomfortable Conversations.
That's it.
There
they've got twins.
Yes, they do. Yeah, I had Josh on just last week.
Yeah, so we had Sean on a little while ago, earlier this year.
Well, it's really interesting because Josh raised the point to me. I asked him about the labelling that exists in a lot of social constructs now. And I said, do you think it's an effort to feel a sense of belonging to a people, to a community? And he said, when did we become so focused on identity again? He said, identity for a lot of human history has led to tribalism, it's led to wars, it's led to disputes. And it made me think about a James Clear quote, the tighter we cling to our current identity, the harder it is to grow beyond it. And so I thought, it's an interesting exercise to think, if I think less about who I am and how I fit in, is it an easier way just to exist in the world?
Yeah, I think James Clear, he wrote
Atomic Habits,
right? So I think, I would agree that we walk around a lot worrying about what others are thinking about us when they're really just thinking about themselves. And the whole, like, I feel like people have an identity because they feel that sense of belonging, right? If you didn't have any identity, if you didn't believe in the ideology of identity, then where would you know where you belong in your hobbies, your habits, your relationships? I feel like you do need to... You don't want to obsess over those things. You would much rather feel like, okay, well, I'm comfortable with who I am and I'm comfortable with where I fit in society in terms of what I love to do, who I love, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But like, it's hard because there are people that obsess over their identity instead of just being able to sit comfortably with it. Like, I would sit here and say, like, I'm not 100%. I'm not obsessed with my identity, but I'm not 100% comfortable with my identity either. In a lot of different settings, but the things that I know is that, like, what I enjoy to do, the people I want to be around. It's a prickly subject because obviously, you know, someone like Josh who's having all these uncomfortable conversations about uncomfortable things. He's probably much more educated than I would be to really discuss it.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the key word there is you said obsess, and I mentioned that quote and said cling to. Maybe if you don't feel a need to be attached to your identity, but can just be comfortable existing in it, then that's the key, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Like you see those people that are the most confident in public and around people, they might be not comfortable being that, really. That might be all for show, and then they go home and they're like, fuck, I'm exhausted from pretending to be so confident and comfortable in myself. Which, look, sometimes I would feel like that if I feel like I've had to perform because of sort of what I do for a job, and then I come home and it's like, well, that's not my true identity. My true identity is like, I'm happy just being here right now. It's a prickly one. It's a
very prickly one. It's a very prickly one. And it makes me think about, I listened to a very moving episode of your podcast with Matt where you spoke about your relationship with anxiety and depression. And it's interesting because for a lot of guys who I'd say maybe similar to how you grew up, very relaxed, casual, collected kind of character, that's not something they necessarily feel comfortable opening up about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, our society, like for young men, where we've grown up being like, all about the bands, boys, all about bands, you know, and like you grow up playing footy, you grow up, you know, surfing, playing soccer, doing all these things in a group environment with a bunch of boys who will take the piss out of each other, but they're too afraid to talk about themselves and how they're actually feeling and their emotions and what's going on at home or what's going on in their relationships or what's going on with their kids or what's happening with their friends, or, you know, it could be an addiction. They're quite happy to pull each other's pants down, but maybe every now and then you got to pull your own pants down a little bit, if that makes sense. And I mean, for me, having kids was like the biggest reality check in that space where I was just like that. I'd never thought about my mental health. I always thought mental health was for people who were mental. You know what I mean? And that's how we grew up, like, you know, going to a mental hospital when it's not necessarily a bad word. Everyone has mental health, whether it's strong, whether you're struggling, whether it needs work or whatever it might be. But I grew up thinking that, no, I don't have any problems. And until I had kids and identified, and my wife was a big help in that because she was also really struggling, identified it wasn't anything to me until then. Yeah.
Why did becoming a dad shine a light on maybe what was it that actually exhibited the struggle, or was that just the shining light on, oh, something's not right here?
Yeah, it was my firstborn was quite a difficult baby, and new parents struggle every new parent struggles because there's the constant waking up, there's all the pressures of, especially, not just mums and dads have a different sort of pressure. Mums is to nurture, to be there, to breastfeed, to all these things that we can't do, obviously. But for me as a male, I had to watch my wife struggle to do all of those things with no sleep, and then for me to feel like I need to make sure they're okay without checking I'm okay. And then I think the lack of sleep, the frustration of like, this is meant to be a loving, amazing moment in our lives and it's not. Eventually things just clicked that I'm not okay. Like, it was hard to nail down. I mean, my wife suffered from postpartum depression pretty bad. Just lack of sleep, really. That was the biggest factor. And then I had to check them into a mental hospital, both her and my newborn, for 8 weeks. The travel back and forth from there, the lack of sleep from me, having to watch them and watch what my son was putting my wife through, just compounded. And I was sort of too busy trying to make sure they were okay, and also resenting him so much. I've openly said that I hated him, you know, and it kills me to say that now because he's my eldest, my little boy. But in the moment, it was why do we bring this thing into the world to tear us apart and both kill us mentally? And, you know, we were in a good place. Like they were in a mental hospital. I could go see them. I could stay there here and there. And eventually when I checked them out, they had gotten tools to work, you know, help with his sleep, and April to help with her mental health. And then they were getting better and I was getting worse. I had developed a fairly heavy drinking habit because I was home alone. I was sad. I was questioning whether I wanted to be around anymore. And I at the time, I didn't really know what all this meant. I was kind of just thought, I just need to escape somehow, whether it was to run away or whether it was to essentially kill myself. I didn't know at the time what it was. When they did come home and they were getting better and there was improvements and he was sleeping better, you know, he was starting to feed better. He was starting to do everything better, which was great. And mainly my wife could start to bond with him because no one was bonding with this poor kid because he was an absolute fucking terror. And it's not his fault. It's just how he was created, right? And then, there was a time there where they were getting better and I was getting more angry. I was getting more pissed off. I think I just never got over watching what he was doing to April. And I was coming home from work and she was a shell of a person. I've resented him for it so bad. And my wife eventually said to me, we're all getting better and you're getting worse. So what do we need to do about it? And the stigma behind talking to someone at that moment was like I completely crushed and went straight to my wife's GP. And we'd been in there so many times talking about my wife. And once I checked in and I sat down, she just said to me, I know exactly why you're here. She knew. She was like, I as soon as I saw your name and it was just you, not the family, I knew why you were coming in. And she was just like, you know, I don't know what the statistic is for new dads whose wives who have postnatal depression, something like 50%, 1 in 2, the male ends up having some sort of mental illness or some sort of struggle, something like that. That might not be right. Somewhere around that. It's high, but it's not spoken about at all.
No.
And I mean, from that point, it was like I was more. The stigma from talking to someone was crushed and gone because I knew I needed help. But then the stigma around medication and being medicated and all that sort of stuff comes up, and you're like, I don't want to be that guy who's medicated. And that's such a stupid way to think about it because, you know, why wouldn't I do whatever I can to get back on track so that I can bond with my child and love my child and, you know, be there for my wife and everything again. But yeah, it was like, to answer your question, becoming a parent is fucking so hard for anyone. You could have the most perfect baby in the world, but there's always some sort of struggle. It's hard work. There's the sleepless nights. Everything compounds, and if you don't pick up on it, you know, and you don't break down your own stigma of talking about it, especially as a young man, we all see where that ends up, right? And I'm glad that I didn't get there. The thoughts were there. There were thoughts where, like I said, of escape. And it came in pretty thick and fast. So I'm glad my wife said, fucking sort yourself out. And I always say to people now, it's kind of like when you're on an airplane, right? They're giving the safety instruction and they're telling you to fit your mask before you fit your child's mask. You need to do that. Fit your own, then fit theirs. Make sure, because you want to give them 100% of yourself. You don't want to give them half-assed and save them, and then you just get forgotten about, and we all know where that ends up.
You know, you just mentioned all of those feelings and thoughts that you're overwhelmed with at that period of time where you're struggling. Were you able to speak on any of that, or was it just all unspoken at the point in time until your wife recognised the change in character and the change in the way that you were showing up?
I was so focused on them without focusing on me. It took my sister as well to say to me, are you okay? You need to sort yourself before you can sort anyone else. But I was like, nah. I need to sort these guys out because April had just been through an emergency C-section, a traumatic birth, a child who won't sleep. she was a complete shell of a person. Everything had changed about her because of the circumstances, and my focus was them and not me. When you've got to find some time for yourself to recognize, and that I was so caught up in it that I didn't really even recognize how much I was drinking, how aggressive I was, not towards them, just towards everything. I was angry. I was so subconsciously angry. We lived on DY Beach at the time, and my wife would go surfing or something. Go out the front, go surfing. Just go and do something for you. And she was just trying to help, and I'd be like, fuck, I'd have the shits with that for starters. And then because I was so angry, so tired, and so worked up, I remember sometimes I would underwater, I would scream because felt like the only place where no one would hear it. I could feel it. Yeah, and it was just like it wasn't even an outlet. It was just I would feel nothing afterwards. I would just scream underwater for no reason, and it was like I felt like at the time if I just got it out, I could go back and focus on them and not me. But yeah.
It's almost like you were trying to let just a little bit of pressure out to just
For sure.
go back and exist in it again until it just builds up to the point where you just need to let it. But it kind of never works, does it?
Nah.
If you don't address the root cause of anything, like you can patch up a leak.
Exactly right.
But if you don't fix the origin of the leak, it's going to keep doing its thing. Water always finds a way.
I remember really vividly trying to snap out of it. I think one night I went and met up with a mate to watch a football game. And I was so worked up with the result of that game that I just fucking smashed my phone all over the ground for no reason whatsoever. And it was like, fuck, even then I didn't even, now reflecting on it, I'm like, fucking hell, like this could have gone so many different ways. Thankfully, I thankfully caught myself and my wife caught me before it got way worse. And look, it's been a number of years now. Like, thankfully, Oscar and our relationship is a million times better. He's a good kid. But like, I still, it's still tough. It's stressful now. And like, I still see a therapist once a month. I'm still medicated. Like it sort of goes back to as well, like what I hide behind. I hide all that stuff. I hide my anxiety and my depression, all that sort of stuff behind, my humour and all that.
Can I ask, if you had sat down with 10 different groups of parents who were in early stage, had surpassed early stage, who were well experienced, who had different experiences of the early years of childbirth and becoming parents, and they had given you absolutely every bit of warning about what's to come, what to look out for, they'd given you everything to expect, could any amount of information have actually prepared you and potentially allowed you to avoid?
No. Nothing can prepare you for parenthood. You just don't know what you're going to get. Like you can read every book, you can listen to every podcast, you can listen to every expert speak. You just don't know what you're going to get. And the reality of the perfect situation is so, it's like, okay, it's sort of sold to you as if you're gonna have your firstborn child, you're gonna love it to death, you're gonna have it's gonna be all rainbows and butterflies. It's really sold to you like that. And people try and tell you that it might not be, but the reality is that my wife was in such a place where she was like, I can't talk to any of the other mums. I feel like they love their kids and I fucking hate mine. And I can't, and there would be so many new mums out there that feel the pressure of like, I have to love this child all the time. I have to love them no matter what they do. Essentially, they're spitting in your face every day, right? And you sort of got to go, okay, well, it's hard. It's hard for me to bond with this child right now. But you know, you've got to be persistent. You've got to be resilient. But like, it's really hard when you got no sleep. You can't expect your brain to be fully functioning when you're working on a couple of hours sleep every night for 6 months. And I always say to parents, you know, like, talking about your kids' sleep in early stages is such a kick in the teeth. I remember we've got a really tight-knit mothers group still. Like, we're nearly 6 years strong. And I can talk to them about anything. But I remember at the time, everyone was like, oh, you know, my kid's doing this, sleeping like that. And I think I just got to the point where I was like, shut the fuck up about bragging about your kid sleeping 4 hours last night. Because we've got people over here that haven't slept in fucking days. Just read the room. And I know that they're like on a journey as well. But like, it's really tricky when mums already have all this pressure on them for another mum to be like, oh, little Timmy slept 6 hours last night. I'd fucking knock you out. You know, like, if I can't imagine the pressure that my wife was under for then someone to say my kid slept and yours didn't. Think about that. And that's it would come out of someone's mouth as if like there's no harm intended, there's no malice in this, but you just don't know what the other mum's really going through, and the other dad as well. Like I said, the dads, it's way harder for them to talk, and so many of them are forgotten about because it is about mum. I can't breastfeed. I don't need to be the healthiest capsule for this baby. I just need to be there and help support. And that's where it's like, Dad, you'll be right. You can sleep on the couch. But you'll be right, mate. You'll live. Yeah. But ultimately, like I said, what I was going through could have gone so many different ways. I could not be sitting here right in front of you now. That was it's a very true possibility. If I didn't do anything about it, I guarantee you I'd be dead.
How often do you think about that?
Every day. I think about I think there's some guilt there too, but I try and I definitely tell myself when I feel guilty about saying that I resented him and hated my kid and that I didn't want to be around, that I was happy to just pack up and leave. It was just, I can feel guilt. When I do feel guilty about it, I tell myself that's not you talking. That's the sleepless nights talking. That's all this compounding feelings. That's not the real you talking like that. Like, I think now when I have those thoughts about escape, because I still do all the time, I'll go through moments where I'm in my own thoughts and I'm depressed or whatever it might be, or like I feel like my alcohol consumption and stuff might be a little bit out of control, and I feel it again where I'm like, I want to escape. The one thing now that stops me from doing that is the look on that kid's face. That stops me from doing it. And that's the complete opposite. I would look at him and go, I fucking hate you. And now I see that head. I see it. Every time I get to the point where I'm like, I would love to escape my situation, he pops up and I think, I can't imagine that kid growing up without me. Can't imagine it.
That's a really powerful perspective shift, isn't it? Totally.
Like, I was really shocked, and I was actually talking to my mum about this on a cruise ship, believe it or not. And she was talking. I'm very open with this. I'm very open with about it to my family, and I was telling Mum that I was struggling. I think at the time I was consuming alcohol every night. I was because of the line of work I'm in. I'm at events. I won't name the beer sponsor, but I'm an ambassador for a beer sponsor and stuff, as much as I love them to death. But like, there's times where I'm not okay, right? And it's okay. That's okay. I still see a therapist for that. But I remember telling her that story that I think one night I was just so sick of myself. And sometimes you just get, I don't know, maybe you ever feel this, we might not feel it. You just get sick of yourself. You're like, fuck, I'm so sick of myself. And I don't know what it might be. It might just be a chemical imbalance at that time, or it might be most likely the alcohol speaking or the come down from alcohol speaking. But I said to her, I was like, when I've been at that point where it's like, I don't want to be around anymore. He's the face that I see. And that would stop me every day of the week now. Yeah, can't imagine that little boy without me.
That's so special to hear because, mate, I can't even imagine what that would feel like. And for me, it's very interesting to hear you say this because I think about fatherhood and that prospect of my future with so much joy and excitement, but it kind of exists in a dream fairy tale land at the moment because you never really think about the hardships before they're there.
Yeah.
You don't forecast, how am I going to feel on 2 hours sleep?
Yeah.
How am I going to feel when I feel like all of this love and energy that I'm pouring into this little human being isn't being reciprocated just yet? How am I going to feel when I'm hard on myself because I don't feel like I'm living up to the expectation that I had for myself coming into this? There's all of these challenging emotions that you don't forecast because we tend to play in I'm just thinking about the positives. I'm forecasting the positives
and it's so sold to you like that too.
Yeah.
Which when the positives are positives, and don't get me wrong, when the positives are positives, fuck, it's amazing. When that kid smiles or laughs at you for the very first time, there is nothing else like it. So I understand why this narrative is sold to everybody of it is all rainbows and all the good times and the perfect, but then you get blindsided. Sometimes some people don't. And I always say, like, when I meet parents, expecting parents, I'm like, I really hope you get a sleeper because it will change everything, right? There's always going to be complications in other way, or maybe not, or there's so many different variables, right, with childbirth and small kids. But I always say, I just hope you get a sleeper because, like, you could be having the world's worst day with a baby who's unsettled or not feeling great. You're not feeling great, but then, once everyone goes down to sleep and everyone can rest and recover, tomorrow's another day. You don't want to start tomorrow in 2 hours' time, right? You want to start tomorrow in 8 hours' time and everyone's rested. And I feel like as a dad too, there's a lot of pressure on. I remember I felt guilty for not getting up. Well, I felt guilty if I didn't make the same amount of effort in the middle of the night as my wife, in terms of, like, if she was up, I was up. But that just equals two tired parents. Two half-rested people does not equal a fully rested person in any situation. And I think, like, both, the open communication with April and I for our second child, completely different. She was a sleeper. There were times where she wasn't. Every child regresses. The experience was way different. And we had learnt things, because we're experienced now. In the first time, it's like I say, you can't go to a brand new job and be expected to be the best at it on the first day. And I feel like that's the pressure that mums feel and dads feel, mainly mums, because they're the main source of everything at that moment. But with our second child, we had learnt from our mistakes. The positives of having a second child, you learn from your mistakes, of course. And the communication was much more open. And, it was like, okay, well, instead of us both trying to get up and do everything in the middle of life, let's split it up. Let's give mum rest. Dad gets rest. Might not be for mum as much as she needs, but I would have to go to work the next day so we could pay the bills. So, there's all those variables as well. I think we were much more equipped the second time around because the fairy tale was like, okay, well, we need to prepare now for if the fairy tale becomes a nightmare,
How much of the male bravado and ego gets in the way of that? Because I think about, as guys, we like to sit atop of our white horse and feel like...
and solve the problems.
We're solving the problems.
Yeah, like fix that.
We can do all the protecting, all the providing. It's part of that masculine energy, right? Is you want to be action-oriented. But I say to my partner all the time, my expectation for myself is higher than my expectation of her for me.
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, that doesn't make sense. Like coming into Christmas, right? We're planning a honeymoon next year and we've got all these things we're looking forward to. So we're trying to save some money. And I said, hey, don't give me any Christmas presents this year. I'll get you stuff, but like I don't need anything. And she's like, how do you think that makes me feel? I want to spoil you.
Yeah, exactly right.
Like, I want you to
it's
feel
such
like
a male thing. Hey,
we're loved. And I'm like, oh, I don't care about that. I just care about you feeling good.
It's really funny, like you say that, because I remember when having Oscar, and I would get so frustrated with myself if I couldn't change the nappy perfectly, you know. And it's like my expectations of myself, they unrelenting standards is what they would call it, right? You're like, okay, if I'm not there, then I'm not happy, and I feel like it is you got to put your ego aside, and you got to tell yourself you can't solve all the problems, because that was what I was trying to do. I was trying to solve all the problems, someone else's problems, instead of solving my own problems, because I thought I didn't have any.
What do you think I know what you said, you can't prepare for this, right? Yeah. But if you were going to sit here and give me a piece of advice, how I could prepare myself as well as I possibly could for that impending day when Soph and I have our first baby in our arms, if we're blessed enough to experience that, what could I do to prepare myself?
Prepare to open the... Okay. Firstly, I would say you both need rest. You both need adequate rest, and you need to communicate how you're going to juggle that, because your wife her sole job is to provide for this baby. You could be any blob in that moment. Okay, in that moment, you just need to be able to give her some sort of reprieve, and vice versa. If you've got to go to work, which a lot of dads, they go straight back to work. I'm really lucky now with what I do, but then I wasn't. I had to go straight back to work. I had to take all this time off to look after my family. But I would say you need to give each other time to rest, and that works both ways. So if, for example, like what I mean by that is there's a nighttime routine, right? You're in a nighttime routine. You let your wife go off and go to sleep first. You do the next couple of feeds via bottle if that works for you. Once again, there's going to be all these different variables that come into play, whether the baby takes a bottle, whether it doesn't take a bottle, whether it takes it from you or whether it takes it from mum. There's going to be all these different variables, but you need to be willing to adapt and ready to adapt. Another piece of advice that I received was in the middle of the night when the baby wakes up and you're both awake, for you as the husband or the father, don't say a fucking word. Don't talk to each other. If she says to you, can you get me some water? Don't even say yes. Just go and get it. Because you're so heightened at that point. And a friend of mine who's got a 4-month baby now, he said the best advice I've ever given him was that. He said when we first came home, we would argue in the middle of the night over nothing. So if I said to you, if April would say to me, hey, can you get me some water? I'm like, yeah. She'd be like, what's with the tone? You know what I mean? And it's not her fault. Her hormones are through the roof because she's trying to provide for this baby, and you're all tired.
It's the emotion in the room.
It's the emotion in the room, and it's going to happen. And people argue it in the middle of the night. I remember fucking yelling at each other at 3 o'clock in the morning. And who's that going to help? No one. And I thought the best piece of advice someone gave to me I used to work with was like, just if you are going to be up together in the middle of the night, just shut up, boy. Like she's exhausted. She's got a baby sucking the life out of her. She's probably really dehydrated and starving. Or the least you could do is just keep your mouth shut.
How much do you wish? And I know you can't go back and change things. And so I don't love those questions like, what would you change if you could go back?
Yeah.
It's not possible, right? But moving forward, if you could hand that piece of advice around to the dad, the mum, the parent who is expecting to bring life into the world, what piece of self-work could you do in the lead up? Like I'm thinking, had you have had a better understanding of your own emotions and the way that your brain worked and that relationship with your mental health, do you think you would have been better equipped to respond to that change in stimulus?
Yeah, I think we talk about a lot as parents, you talk about filling your cup. you talk about filling your kid's cup, you talk about filling your wife's cup. I think you need to find, and for both mum and dad, and you got to fill your own cup without being selfish. If that makes sense. Because
which is a fine line.
It's such a fine line, because you could be like Matt and I always joke about the dads who play golf, but they take up golf like after they become dads, and it's like, you've crossed the line, bro. That's 6 hours on a Saturday. Like, get fucked. Like, none of us are doing that. That's really selfish for you. I know you've got your hobby. That's fine, but you're gonna have to rush through those golf games, bro, if you want to play golf. But it's funny how many dads pick up golf, and we know why they're doing it, right? But I think like you've got to fill your cup, both mum and dad, and you fill your cup, but don't feel guilty about it. And that, again, that's for both. But also be very self-aware that you're not taking the piss out of that. I think for April and I, with both kids, if she wanted to do something for herself, I'm like, go and do it. And she would know that, okay, go and do it. When I feel like my cup is full, then I can return. And she would say, go and do something for yourself. And I would not take the piss out of that. I'd say, okay, well, I'll be an hour. Just have that hour for that time. Sometimes that can be used for doing your hobby. Sometimes it can be used just a bit of self-reflection. I think if it's hard for guys who can't talk at all about their emotions to self-reflect on their emotions. I can't imagine them sitting there pondering, looking out into the ocean, self-reflecting. It's just not going to happen. But you find something that helps you, like either start to think about what you're thinking about, whether it's, whether you go for a walk or go for a run. A run was a big one for me, like just to...
How good's a try?
Just to get the cogs moving. And I honestly feel like everyone at some point in their life should go and talk to a professional about how they feel. If you're the happiest guy on earth, go and talk to someone about how fucking happy you are, because it'll help you get into tune with what you're feeling and how to express it too.
Did your first therapist click with you, or did it take a couple?
I've got this is my second therapist, but I always put it as in the evolution of me changed. Like, I evolved, so my needs for that person evolved as well. It wasn't the first therapist I had was really good at. She was quite an older woman, a lot further past her. She's more into grandmotherhood, but she had a different set of eyes that I would have usually spoken to. She was like, look, she was very much above and looking down on what's happening for her kids and then her grandkids. So it was kind of like a bit of breath of fresh air for her to be like, kids are turds, and they can be. And it's like, she's like, and really talk me through those unrelenting standards and, giving yourself a break and having some, these certain tools to try and help you through those moments. And then when I sort of evolved into 2 kids and I still wanted to make sure I checked in on myself, I was recommended to a therapist who sort of specialized a little bit more in, some substance abuse, like alcohol abuse, and, like in that space, because I had evolved with what I needed from them. And I was past the really hard times of parenting, and I was more into I want to try and be the best version of me for me, right? And this new therapist given me different tools and different things to think about, right? And as I get older.
One thing I find myself asking a lot of dads on the podcast, because, I have a fair few, like probably 95% of my guest portfolio are men.
Yeah.
And I guess you guys would have similar experience to that, because you just naturally know more guys as a guy, and you connect kind of easily. Yeah, there's just that natural connection. And I find I ask a lot of the guys that I have on how their self-belief changes when they bring kids into the world. And let me give you some context here. I am a big believer and big dreamer, and I have a lot of faith in myself. Right, and so I have these big dreams I set out to achieve in my life, and I'm trying to bring these things into reality. And I've noticed even just a little barrier to believing in myself, having a partner that I love and want to be able to look after, because I feel there's an extra set of consequences if I fail, right? And it's more so with children. And I've heard a lot of different perspectives on how that changes when you bring kids into the world, and especially as a husband too. Can you talk to a bit of your experience there?
Yeah, I really found that as I become a parent, you're more fearful of certain situations. You know, when you're young, you're growing up, you're fearless, right? Especially men. We think we're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, but then you get a couple of little kids underneath you and you're like, there is consequence. Like, I can't, for example, surf a wave of consequence anymore because the consequence is my kids will go hungry, you know, and they'll be without a dad, if you want to put it that way. I think in terms of dreams, I've never been a big dreamer. I never set out on the journey I'm on now with a dream in mind. Kind of just was like, you know what I want to do? I want to do what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And having kids is, I should be more cautious. I should be way more cautious with my decisions. But at the same time, I'm like, well, if I'm cautious, I'll be miserable. And I want to be more present for them. And, you know, this version of me as I grow older and had kids, yeah, there is that fear that, am I doing the wrong or am I doing the right thing? Because you're not just doing it for yourself anymore. And, you know, yeah, my biggest thing is that you definitely become more fearful of what could happen.
Do you think that you're the kind of character that is driven by that fear, or somewhat frozen still?
I would say I'm more driven than frozen still. But I never really acknowledge it at the forefront of my brain. I always subconsciously feel that the fear would drive me. But I wouldn't be frozen still. I feel like I wouldn't be where I am now if I was completely frozen.
Well, it's interesting that, you know, because fear, I guess for some people, could be considered a dirty fuel, right? Like, how long does that actually do you some good, right? It's like when you act from a place of lack, you might be driven to achieve the things that you feel you need, to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel like you have what you once didn't. And that's the story of a lot of people who have become wealthy, who grew up through hardship, and so they wanted the security that they never felt as a child. But eventually, unless you change that fuel, then it kind of leads to dangerous paths. I wonder, yeah, it can do for sure. I wonder for you, like, this is still so new, like the creative space, you've only played and dabbled in this for the last couple of years. Do you see yourself gaining confidence in the consistency of your work and the consistency of your successes, that there will be less fear in the future?
Yeah, it's funny, like, meeting someone like Matt, who's been around the traps for quite some time. You know, I do feel the fear with certain things, but something in me accomplishes it somehow. And he's said that to me so many times. I've been like, oh, I'm, you know, so nervous. But he's just like you said, like, I've only been doing this for a couple of years, and yeah, I feel like every time I come up against that, the thing that I'm fearful of, I'll smash it out of the park. And that's, don't know, that's just, I can't tell you what that is or where that comes from, but something in me when the moment comes.
It's a bit of mongrel.
Yeah, exactly right.
Running off the back fence.
Yeah, like Matt, like I remember we hosted the podcast awards last year. I've never hosted anything in my life, and it was like 1,000 people or whatever. And Matt was like, at the end of it, Matt was like, "Fuck, mate, you killed it. Like you wouldn't be able to tell. All last year, TV appearances, all this sort of stuff I've never done before in my life." This week we just did a mental health talk in front of, you know, like 200 people, and Matt's like, it's just, you just naturally pick that up in the moment. And you know, I don't know what it is in that moment. I'm definitely scared. I know that. And every situation where it's like, I'm a fish out of water, I'm scared. But yeah, I think maybe that's what pushes me through it and gets me to the next big thing, whatever that happens to be. But yeah.
You said before, I just want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do?
This. I want to do this. There's nothing that I don't... let me put it a different way. I don't want to do what I don't want to do. If that makes sense? And I hate it when someone tells me I can't do something. I fucking hate that. I hate it when someone tells me don't do something. It's a bit of a rebel in me where I'm like... I see it in my son so much where he's so good at finding a way to do it, to do whatever he wants to do. He'll figure it out. The other day, I said to him, you can't take your toys to kindy because they get the shits about it. The kindy gets the shits about it because they fight. The kids fight over. It's like a prison yard down there.
Yeah.
Just
without the jumpsuits.
Yeah, exactly right. And I said, you can't take it. And he said, okay. I said, you can bring it in the car. I'll bring it back home. That's fine. That is a compromise. Dropped him off. I've done a U-turn up the end of the street, and they're all out in the playground at the front. And I come past, and I see him with his mates, and he's got it in his hand. He's snuck it into his pocket.
Lion King, holding it up in the air.
Yeah, he's found it, and I've pulled over. I've put the window down, and I went, oi! And he went, and hit it. And I was like, don't lose it. And I just I could have easily been like, I should discipline this kid, but I was actually quite impressed that he wouldn't take no. He wouldn't take, you're not allowed to do that for an answer. He wanted to find a way around it. And I think I'm really similar to that. Like, he must get it from somewhere. And there's things I'm scared of that I don't want to do, but I should do. And I'll do my best to do them, but I don't want to be told you can't do that. You can't do something, because it just makes me want to do it way more. I wouldn't have left a secure job for my family if I wasn't told that, yeah, you can't do that for a living. You can't talk for a living. My mates will say to me now, they're like, you've always wanted to do nothing for a living, talk shit for a living. Now you literally built something out of nothing. All because I was told I couldn't do it. You know, like, I had a full-time job and I had to stop posting social media because I was told I wasn't allowed to do it. And that just fucking drove me nuts. And it drove me to a point where they were like, you don't want to be here, do you? I said, I don't need to be here anymore because I could leave today and this will be my full-time job.
Can I ask, what were you doing before this?
I worked in solutions, recruitment solutions. So I used to come up with how businesses would hire and fire legally, essentially.
Okay, and so what was their pick with you doing content?
Because my client was CBA, it was quite big four bank. It was more like, hey, we don't want the client to get the wrong idea about you, which is bullshit. They didn't want the wrong idea about them, which is fine. Which is really, really funny because when I left, our national manager was a really big fan of our podcast. He was like, I love it. He said, it's great. Go do it. Go and do it. You know, and a redundancy offer came up and I took it. And I reflect back on it, and I remember starting this journey with 227 followers, and they were just my friends. And then I left my job with like 300,000 in one platform and 300,000 on another platform that I'd built from absolutely nothing. And when I met Matt was like, you intrigued. I intrigued him because, you know, he's got his profile and has built what he's got, which is very successful. But he was like, you just, out of nothing, built this. And I think what really put me on was like that I was told that I can't do it, or you don't do it, or you're not allowed to do that, or I think that's what really, really pushed me. I want to do what I want to do. And I don't think anything had stopped me.
How did you guys meet?
Social media.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've been mates now for about 2 years. We met socials, and then we actually caught up at a Meta event, and then started making a couple of videos here and there, and people wanted more. So we just went with it, and now it's successful. So it's crazy to think that I get to spend so much time with my family. I'm so lucky in what I do. I subconsciously put a lot of effort into what I do, but don't like to show that. There's things I need to improve on for sure, but like I think, I've just worked at it so hard. Like for me, when I started, I used to post 10 videos a day and churn them in, churn them out, because that's like, I don't want to be forgotten. I think I wanted to, there was more to my story than I was living. And that's what I thought. I thought there's more to me than this, this corporate guy with as much as I love my family and stuff, there's more to me than just this. And that's why I've created what I've created.
And it's a great outlet to showcase that, isn't it?
For sure. I remember, and everyone did during that time, during COVID, where it was like, you sort of took for granted your day-to-day interactions of them being your outlet to being stuck at home. Channel it into something good. Like people channel it into something shit. People channel it into something bad. But a lot of people channel, and so many cool things came out of COVID that we forget about. Like, the whole flexible working for people. Think of how much of a relief that is now for parents. Like I remember when it all came, like by the time I had been made redundant, COVID was not over, but it was, people were back in the office, but back in the office a couple of days a week, and people were just so much happier because they were like, I get to actually see my kids now. I get to, have a working day at home and pick them up from school at like 3:00 instead of getting home when it's dinner time and being shitty because I've been on a bus for an hour. But also, like, we interviewed Sam Mack, who's the weatherman for Channel 7.
I had him on the show a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and he met his now wife because of COVID. They were isolated and they just wanted someone to talk to. And for 6 months, they'd never met each other, but they would cook dinner together, they would chat, and it's something so amazing came out of that. Like, honestly, one of the most modern day love stories possible, a COVID interaction that turned into a family. There's so many cool things that came out of it. And for me, this is what came out of it.
I think a lot about what you alluded to there, how important freedom of choice is for people to feel as though they're in control of their life. Like, choice is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, totally.
To choose to respond to a situation in a positive light makes you feel empowered. To choose a career path makes you feel like you've chosen to show up there. It's not a chore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like you're a prisoner serving a sentence.
Exactly right.
Like, choice is so powerful. When you made the choice to do this full time, was there a lag period in which you felt like you were going to work not wanting to be there because you had such a passion for this thing that existed outside of it?
Yeah, it was. I'm like a piece of glass. I'm pretty transparent. And it was very obvious. I had some team leaders that were like, get after it, go and do it. Like, they wanted to do their passions and they wanted to do things, and there were things in their way that were stopping them. And they were like, look, go and do it. Do it. And it was like pretty obvious that I didn't want to be there. I was just there for the paycheck. Excuse me. And, like, I never really, it's funny, I always, I sort of underappreciated it when it first happened, when it was like, all right, I don't have a job anymore. And it's like, now I kind of do this. I underappreciated what I had created. A really good friend of mine, Jerry, an American guy, who's really intense. He's a lovely guy. I think I saw him like a couple of weeks after it all went down with work, and I a transition, and he was like, "Don't forget that you built this for yourself. You wanted to create a better life for yourself, and you did it." So yeah, I chose to do that. There were two choices. Either I give up on what I was doing and just go and do the sensible thing and get paid every week and feed the kids, or I go, fuck it. Like, I choose not to do that because that's fucking boring. And I could not imagine. I would never go back to a bore. I would find something else. Now, I always say that, like, if I was to be cancelled, I'd go down swinging and I'd find something along the way while I'm swinging to pick me back up. I would never. There's more to me than that 9 to 5 guy. There is way more to me than that. My story won't end like that.
Mate, I love that you can recognise that, because I think for a lot of people, this discomfort that comes with not having an income to fall back on. Like, I probably took the leap too early and had to sell a house. Disaster.
But that's all part of your story, right?
It's part of the story.
It's part of your journey.
But now I have an income again, and I'm very transparently similar to you. I'm glass. I'm absolutely see-through, and I am certainly working towards a life in which I get to do what I love full time, because I know that means I'm a better man at home. There's more joy in my life. There's more fulfillment. There's all of those good things that come with doing something you love when you can put your energy into it. But I often think about when the opportunity's there to take that leap again, where there's enough financial security and stability for me, how much courage will I have? And I won't know until I'm in the moment. I'd like to think a lot.
Yeah. Just shut your eyes and jump off.
Yeah.
Like, you can always pick yourself back up again. You can always do that. And look, it's funny because my wife is the rational one out of us, and I wasn't allowed to quit my job, but I got made redundant, so she didn't have a choice. Yeah. And did I encourage the redundancy? Yes, but I knew what I was doing, and I thought, you know what? And as soon as that day came, and I rang Matt and I said, actually, there was before that happened, and I kept thinking I was going to get made redundant. I kept calling myself the cockroach because I wouldn't die. I was like, fuck. And Matt and I were both like, we are so fucking busy. I needed to leave my job one way or another. And then when I rang him and I said, the king has fallen, and he was just like, fuck, let's go. And we literally pedal to the metal. We wanted to build something that was so many dimensions to it. Like, we've got not just the podcast, we've got the book, we've got the calendar, we've got all these other social things in and around it that we do to try and make it so it's not just got the one face. It's got resistant. You can look at it from any angle, and there's something else there. So yeah, it's also hard to reflect and be proud of what you've done until you start really talking about it. So yeah, I'm safe to say I'm proud of what I've done, for sure. And
you should be.
Yeah.
What do you think your greatest strength is?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how to answer that question.
Interesting to think about.
It is. It's funny that it's kind of like when you go to like a job interview and someone says, "Tell me about yourself," and you're like, "Oh, who am I?" I don't know what my greatest strength is. I think
if you were to remove yourself from your point of view and see yourself from almost an outsider's perspective, what do you think you'd identify as the strengths?
I think there's a lot of resilience there that I don't recognize, but I think, like, personally, internally, but I think there is more resilience to me than meets the eye. I think internally.
Your story is a testament to that. Like, what you've told me here today screams resilience. In fact, it screams what friend of the show, Tom Nash, says is anti-fragility. Your ability not only to not only to experience stresses and challenges and outlive them, outlast them, but to grow stronger because of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I reckon for sure. I think it's funny, like, just think back to my like whole working career, how many jobs I've had, and I feel like after leaving every single one of them, I felt like a better person or a stronger person, or I've taken something from that to push me to the next thing. It's hard to self-reflect on you. It's hard to reflect on yourself. The strength question is like, fuck, I don't know. Like, you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm friendly. I don't know. You don't know what your strengths are, but if I was the outside looking in and I look back at all the decisions I've made and who I am as a person, I would say that I've been resilient. For sure.
Can I tell you what I think one of your strengths are? I think you're incredibly relatable, because I think maybe your challenge in seeing your strengths and recognizing those things that you should be really proud of is what a lot of people relate to, in the fact that you are a genuinely everyday guy who probably can't recognize his strengths but exhibits them unconsciously.
Yeah, I don't recognize them, and I appreciate your kind words. It's hard to talk about yourself that way.
It is. Why do you think it's hard? Is that a bloke thing?
There's some aspect of it as a bloke thing. I think people as well, it's tooting your own horn when you should be tooting your own horn more. You forget that you should be giving yourself a pat on the back. I think especially for young parents too, those who are listening, just give yourself a pat on the back. You're doing your best, right?
Bloody oath.
And like, yeah, there's no right or wrong there, but I would say, yeah, it's hard to give yourself a high five when you should be giving yourselves more high fives.
Well, we're quick to call out everything that we aren't.
Totally.
It's very challenging for us to recognize when we're blooming.
Yeah.
And I heard someone say, I can't remember who it was, on a podcast very recently. I had like a very interesting podcast with James O'Connor, rugby player, earlier in the year. And he said something to me at the end of the episode that I've kind of been thinking about a lot, because I'm a highly ambitious person, but I struggle to walk the line between ambition and appreciation. I kind of either exist in one place at the one time, right? And so finding the balance for me in gratitude, but not just gratitude, because that comes relatively natural to me, but in recognizing that I'm doing a good job and that I'm showing up, is really hard for me, because I'm very hard on myself. I'm very self-critical, whilst also maintaining my ambition and striving for progress without feeling like I don't have enough in the first place is a real challenge. And James said something right at the end of the podcast to me. He said, live it, be it, you already are it, right? And that idea of you already are it. We talk about like fulfilling our potential a lot, and just a mate of mine reminded me about this the other day. It's like, you already are your potential. Like, it exists, it's there. It's just the choice to recognize it.
Yeah.
And stop being so hard on yourself sometimes. I was thinking about this analogy I heard in a podcast, that we never look at a tree and say that a tree is broken. We just know that a tree evolves through stages. It has a time of the year where it loses its leaves and then it blossoms again, and it has its moment in the sun where we admire the tree and its strength and its resilience and the colour of its leaves and its vibrancy.
Yeah.
But we always recognise that it will go through a stage or a season of life in which it's not all that it can be. Yeah. But that's just natural.
Yeah, for sure.
It's evolution. We forget that as humans.
We do forget that. And it's kind of like Google review, right? If you were going to Google review yourself every now and then, you would always do it when you did something stupid, or you did something that you didn't agree with, or you did something that you didn't think you would never go back and say, hey, I'm going to give myself 5 stars, and this is why. You rarely do that when you need to do that more. I feel it's the same with, so quick to, and people are so quick to look at the negative without recognizing your positives. Like if you were to say, like, for example, you go to a job interview and they'd be like, tell us about your weaknesses. And you're like, well, fuck, now I've got to swing the weaknesses into being potential strengths, right? Why don't they go tell us your strengths and how they could potentially be a weakness? Like, I'm overconfident and that could get me into trouble, right? But yeah, you're right. You're in the moment and you're like, you might have done an hour talk to a group of people and for 59 of those minutes have been inspiring, and for 1 minute you sneezed. And you're like, fuck, I wish I didn't sneeze then for that 1 minute. Made myself look like a dickhead.
Yeah.
But for those 59 minutes, you were phenomenal, but you won't recognise that about yourself.
Very self-critical we are.
I think it's just part of the human analogy, or human, and what's the word I'm looking for?
Experience.
Yeah, I think people need to give themselves more 5-star reviews, I think.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, make sure you leave us a 5-star review because, mate, this has been a cracker. I really appreciate your time. It's always a goal of mine to get behind the surface of what we see in somebody's success and the stuff that we tend to shine a light on, because there are human beings behind every one of these success stories. And, mate, I've really enjoyed hearing some of your story, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for coming all the way here, and apologies for swerving you, but glad we got it. Finally got it done.
We're here now.
Appreciate
Cheers,
it,
brother.
mate. Cheers.